Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for making it up to an 8 a.m. Session. We are very excited you're with us this morning. Our session this morning is looking at key strategies for leaders, particularly leaders who are women newly stepping into roles. We have a few disclosures we'd like to share with you as we get started. And a few kudos for those who have disclosures. So let's do that as well. No, it's all good. It's all good. In our session today, we want to contemplate a couple of challenges and also a couple of really concrete solutions that leaders, particularly women leaders, may be able to embrace in their new roles. And so at this time, I'd love to welcome our panel and give them a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll start maybe at the far end. If you would, Dr. Dirks, tell us what your role is, where you are, and how long you've been in that role.
Hi, I'm Deb Dirks. I am Chair of Emergency Medicine at UT Southwestern in Dallas, and I've been there 8 years.
I'm Linda Brown. I'm Chair of Emergency Medicine at Brown Emergency Medicine, so you can never forget. In Providence, Brown. I've been at Brown for 17 years. I've been in the position a total of about 2.5 years.
Good morning. I'm Mary Tansky. I'm the Chair of Emergency Medicine at OHSU in Portland, Oregon, and I've been at OHSU for 12 years, and I just hit my 6-year anniversary as chair last weekend. Hi, good morning. I'm Rakita Norman. I'm Associate Vice Chair of Emergency Medicine, Health and Quality and Safety at UT Southwestern. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lillian Olson, Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education, Student Affairs at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I've been there for 4 years.
And my name is Lee Patterson. I'm the Chair of Emergency Medicine at ECU in Greenville, North Carolina. And I will be there 20 years this summer, but 6 years in the role that I currently have. So this presentation came about out of some work by Dr. Cheri Hobgood, who is the former chair at Indiana University. And in 2020, she published a couple of articles after some detailed work interviewing chairs and doing a qualitative study on, she aimed for 20 and ended up with 19 women chairs and some comparable men chairs, and did a set of interviews of them and to identify common themes, barriers, as well as strategies she was facing. And out of that work, she identified 4 common challenges that women leaders typically face: a sense of concern over readiness for the role, very few peers or diminishing numbers of peers at the same level that they have. Many more women in leadership roles are likely to inherit a unit that has some struggling culture than comparable male peers did in her study. And a lot of negative faculty reactions or pushbacks or colleague reactions and pushbacks in that role. And she identified as well a series of successful strategies that people would employ to combat those unique challenges faced more commonly by women. And so today we'd like to present a couple of cases that are completely anonymous and unidentified, yet I will tell you many of the panel readily recognized or identified with. And we'd like to talk about those challenges and then also provide some conversation and discussion about how we might address those challenges that those women have faced, and open up for questions for you. So as we're going through this, please feel free to just jump in and ask us questions as we go. All right. The first case we're going to talk about is the case of Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith is the chair of emergency medicine, newly minted chair of emergency medicine, has a strong record of clinical excellence and leadership and experience, probably in settings like this at SAEM. She was excited about taking that role, very optimistic for her vision. That first year or two was pretty tense and perhaps a little rough. I would, as I characterized yesterday when we were talking about this, I think she's having trouble herding her senior chickens or cats, whichever sort of vision you use for that particular structure. And she's finding that when she's speaking up in meetings, she's getting met with silence, only to hear other people talking about that kind of behind her. She is frequently reasserting herself and her role and her authority. Colleagues who previously turned to her for support now really feel, she really feels that distance, and she's feeling very emotionally drained at that. So first year's finished and she's losing some enthusiasm for the role. So I'll turn to my colleagues over here and ask, what do you think is going on with Dr. Smith in this first year? What do you think the challenges are that she's facing? And what would you advise her to do if you were sitting down for coffee with her?
under the debate.
No. Well, you-
You know, I think going into a new job, you have all these ideas that what you want to do, you have a vision on what you see, things, direction are going, and you hope going in that everyone's going to follow. And there are really two types of people that you need to get buy-in from. You need to get that buy-in those who have power and authority, your senior faculty, right? They've been there a long time. They, you know, kind of have the gravitas doing it. You also have to get buy-in from those who have influence but no power, right? And those are the people on the ground. And she's focused on the people that are hard, right? These people may have had allegiance with the other team. They definitely had probably a sweet deal for a long time, and now their existence is threatened. And so getting them to buy in, at least understanding, it is not easy. I can tell you, I walked into probably one of the most toxic situations that could have ever existed in a job, and dealt with this a lot. But she needs to at least understand her concerns and get a little bit of allegiance, or at least a little bit of understanding, so they don't thwart what she's trying to do. They're never going to reach out. I've got some senior faculty who do not. They probably disagree with me now the same way they did 10 years ago, and that's okay, right? We've reached their path on where the department's going.
I think that when you are an internal candidate versus somebody that's coming in that doesn't have as much perspective, it really makes a difference with how you obviously develop relationships, continue relationships, and because there are challenges that are different both ways. And being internal, the relationships that you have with those senior leaders does change. That you become, you know, that peer relationship has to change in order for you to move some things forward. And I think that having the one-on-one conversation still and maintaining the relationship still, for me, has been really important. I think that I don't want to in any way minimize the weirdness and isolation piece, because I do think that when you come into this role, and for me anyway, I can speak for myself, that you aren't quite sure how it's going to work out. I started as an interim, I moved on to official chair, and it was not really something in my initial long-term goals, and I came in and I think finding peers outside of the group to talk to that may not be exactly similar, but people that you meet along the way, and talking to them through some of the issues, and then also still having sounding boards that you can trust within the department that will tell you straight if things are going awry, that you're missing something, because I don't think you have quite the same touch points that you do before you go into the role.
And I think just from sort of like the personal standpoint, I think it's really common for women to be like, oh my gosh, it's me, if you're getting resistance. So I would coach her, or just, you know, discuss with her normalizing that this happens. Change is hard. And I think when you come in, even if you're super excited about it, it's normal for people to sort of push back or kind of test you out. And I think that can be really tricky, because then you start to think that it's something that you're doing or something you're not doing. So helping her normalize that would be one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give her.
And I think sometimes even, I think the hard part is recognizing that you're not actually going to get everyone on your side. And sometimes it takes some new people to begin to make that shift and change the culture in which you want to go. But I think that's incredibly hard, because I think probably most of us came from collaborating with people, and then all of a sudden you're in this different position that people might not necessarily be interested in that anymore.
When we look at institutional strategies or more system strategies, she's tired. Excuse me, she's tired, and she's attending a lot of things, right? She's got lots of committee meetings. Embedded in there, what we probably also don't see, but some of us recognize, is you're tapped for things that are a minority tap, right? There's got to be a woman on this committee. There's got to be a woman on this review. She's getting tapped for some of those things. So one strategy I think she might also consider is the opportunity to delegate to some of these people who are a challenge for her. If that pushback is a lot of verbal pushback or a lot of chatter without action in that space, it's a great place to put somebody to work. This is something you're interested in, you're excited about. This work needs doing by the department. I'm now going to delegate this authority to you. Give it a try and take on this responsibility. Might be another way to do that. Thoughts or questions from the audience about Dr. Smith and her first year challenges? Yes, ma'am.
At what point do you say it's
time for you to find opportunities elsewhere? I mean,
It's a
I have
fantastic
one
question.
So,
Yeah, I can do that. So I call that coaching to exit. And I think, and I have had to do that a couple times, and I feel like, after a series of conversations of what the goals are, what my vision is, giving people an opportunity to sort of get on the bus or move off is a conversation I've had not infrequently with people that are instructive. I feel like it's challenging to do because, sometimes people have been there for a long time. People are very high functioning. They work, they've been a specialist in whatever, specific field that they're in, and they're big contributors. But honestly, sometimes if they have an attitude that is not helpful for the team, it just takes one person to poison the whole well. And so I have helped people find other opportunities. Sometimes that means, you can bring people along and have them have a role in the School of Medicine, or, a different role that is more sort of aligned with what their goals are. And then they stop having all of the energy to try to resist, I guess, what you're trying to achieve. So that's my strategy, is really, helping them figure out what makes them happy, why they're so upset. And I think it takes a lot of time to do that. Multiple conversations. It's never just one conversation. But it is worth having, because you can kind of notice the harmony as soon as the person is doing something that they're thriving in.
I've also noticed that when a new chair comes on, that I've noticed it more in men than women, but they fire, or they somehow, like, there's this drama and somebody exits dramatically. Is that something people learn in like chair school, where,
No.
you have to, establish your authority by the problem children go first or something? I don't know. I've noticed it. And I don't know if it's a thing.
I will tell you, up until I took the job, one of the things I noticed was that people didn't, frankly, get fired enough. If we're being very transparent about it, if we were any other industry, we don't move people on. I was in a group sort of having social dinner last night, and we joked about a previous leader at an institution who was fired, and we said, oh, he wasn't really fired for the usual things. He just couldn't do his job. And I think academic medicine's very much moving towards business of, we are seeing in our institution, I won't speak for theirs, but in our institution, we are seeing a shift in that. We did not, chair school, and there is chair school, does not say come in and fire somebody. And it's been my experience, that's the single hardest first action people do, is that first person you really have to let go.
I think so before you get there, there's
Yes.
other stuff that you have to
Yes.
get through.
Yes.
That action takes support from
Mhm.
so many people
Mhm.
to get it done, right?
Yes.
You can't go in and say, right?
Yeah.
That's not the world we
Yeah.
live in.
We're not in sales.
It takes a long time. And so some of the stuff in this STEM are really about how do you get traction and allies to help make that, right? And
Yes.
that is one of the key things in a new position, is finding people who you can ask, how did you get rid of that person? So I know what to do, right? So you're not, so you don't have to go straight to HR, because that's not ever you want to go to get advice if you want something done. So, like, how do you get through and find those people you can talk to, and get the allies and provide feedback, and then you go with an ask, but that's really hard. I think it's harder since COVID, because it was a lot easier when you go to the cafeteria or go to the faculty club and people and develop relationships and have lunch. But getting those people and those relationships on Zoom is hard. And those are so important as a leader, even if it's, just lateral across, different departments, because everyone's got the same people problems and different flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
being intentional and thinking about what your leadership team and people you surround yourself with, both internal and, like you said, within other departments that can help you. I think that, having a conversation with the people that are not on board with your agenda early, and having like a very straightforward, transparent conversation about, this doesn't feel like it's working. Is it working for you? Is it not working for me? And how, because I think those kind of conversations sometimes, and I think, not to generalize, but I think as women, we sometimes will not be as direct around some of those conversations, because we're trying to fix it on the other side. and going forward and saying, this doesn't feel like it's working, and I really want this to work, but maybe it won't, and thinking about other opportunities is important.
Yeah, great questions. All right, let's take a look at a different leader. This is a younger leader, perhaps a little bit more perspective of we're going to need to help manage this emerging leader. So Dr. Taylor is probably early to maybe getting on mid-career and will volunteer for everything. Department needs it, she'll volunteer for it, picking up extra shifts, welcoming prospective students, lots of different places she showed up. She is committed to the department and really cares deeply about it. She's been thinking about what she wants to do next, but hasn't really had that discussion with anybody. Wasn't really sure if she was ready for this or if she was far enough along even to get to ask, was she ready for it? And she was passed over. She was a little bit shocked when a junior colleague was named the assistant medical director over her. That colleague is smart and enthusiastic, but hadn't really had the years in service that she had, whether or not the experience might have been their years in service. So she's disappointed. She's got some self-doubt and she is not sure what to do next. So I would love to hear what some of you think about working with this young woman.
Well, I think that she needs some strategic alignment of her priorities, her goals with the work that she's doing. This maybe in terms of setting a 1, 3, 5-year plan and really kind of narrowing her focus, because I think she's too all over the place right now, and it's not helping her professionally. It's actually hindering her. But I think once the strategic alignment of her personal goals and professional goals kind of come together, and then the activities are in place, then she can be more direct with approaching those opportunities and be vocal about it and say, hey, I really would like to, if it comes up again, I want to use that for it.
I think that's a huge piece of this, is sort of the imposter syndrome, and it doesn't seem like she's had all the activities aligned, but she also hasn't mentioned what she's interested in. So I think many times we sit back and we're like, we're not qualified for this job. I mean, I will tell you, in interviewing other people, it is surprising how people will apply for jobs that don't even meet the minimum qualifications listed. And I think probably many of us as women in medicine are like, I have to have all of these things and have done even more than that before we even apply. So helping, thinking about mentorship, having those discussions with the chair about these are the things that I'm interested in, how do I get there, as opposed to sort of sitting back and waiting for something to come to you.
So as a chair, how do you see this person sooner? So she thought she was getting seen, right? She thought she was. How do you see her sooner? Or what strategies could you employ as a department to be sure you're not missing this person until we're several years in disappointment into it?
So I would just really underscore the fact that you have to be explicit with what you want. So my department has annual reviews at the end of the year, but we also implemented mid-year reviews that are not with me, actually. So we have different senior faculty that conduct those reviews. They find out what the person likes to do, what has really brought them joy in their current role, and what they might want to do, and they sort of act as a connector. So sometimes maybe they don't have all the answers about the education mission or the research mission, but they can say, hey, have you thought about talking to this person? So that then when they have those conversations, they can bring the information back to me and to my leadership team so that I know who's in line. And then that way, you just get a sense of what their career goals are without having to wait an entire year and potentially have to be passed up for an opening that comes up.
Yeah, I think having those meetings one-on-one, you can't replace that, whether it be with somebody in senior leadership or the chair. I think for me, giving her advice a little bit is really reflecting on why you want the role, is because I think sometimes people are like, I want that role, but it's not clear sometimes what the why is. And that why can be helpful in other opportunities as well. I'm there like, okay, she wants to be program director because she loves curriculum. She loves, problem solving with the residents or some other things that it allows me to give opportunities and do it. And early on, so I meet with new faculty after they've been with us about 8, 9 months or so, all new faculty. and really go through that, and then try to have a cadence where I meet with people regularly, going forward. But it's hard to replace that conversation, that one-on-one conversation that lets you know, okay, now I know who she is, what she wants, and where she wants her career to go. And that may pivot too. So that's why it's important to have ongoing conversations.
I think there's two problems, right, that need to be addressed. One is structural within the department, and the process of tapping is in effect negates the ability for other people to be seen and heard, right? Because you don't give an open invitation to apply. And I think that is the department problem, right? And that is something that I'd say the department chair needs to work on that, right? Because you need to open things up to everyone, so you learn who wants to do it and who you need to develop. And then I really like Marquita's comment on being seen. You need to be seen for the role you're looking at, right? A lot of us think that, you know what, I'm gonna be that team player, I'm gonna be on every committee, I'm gonna take up every shift. Picking up shifts and working clinically makes it really hard to be seen for leadership roles, right? Because you're not making strategic decisions, you're not participating in the operations, you're not being seen by this clinical leadership. But you're doing a great job for the department, you're just not being seen for the role that you're trying to get. And I think that's really important to think about is, as Marquita, a little more strategic about how am I spending my time? And is it giving me the visibility I want, right? You know, it's almost akin to, I'm gonna do great things at another institution, but I want a job at my institution. Well, that's great. Totally respect what you did out there, but no one knows you here. And so how do you fix that? I think that's a mentorship and, you know.
Yeah. I think it can be a really great place for professional development of let's time out, and that plan that you talked about of let's get you refocused on this. I think it needs some development in it as well. And there's an opportunity to really say, let's take a year and pause and regroup and redirect and say, where are you and who are you? I really like the idea of small projects in the focus area. Let's try it on with it. You get in, not necessarily the title, but the project. You've got an outcome, you've got an output, you've got a line item for the CV, but you don't necessarily have the role yet. And then we're sure when you want to take the role. Yeah. Questions for the audience. Won't ask if any of you identify with this person out there, but questions from the group for us around mentoring a little bit of a mid-career, early career stall.
And sometimes it's being creative. It's being creative with new ideas. You know, maybe you have a long end with coach, a director, or lead, but there's multiple people kind of maybe behind. Well, maybe one aspect of the curriculum really kind of, and you can focus on that, do that well, and that makes you notice.
I'm sorry, you had a question.
My chair in residency said that the key to being successful was making yourself like irreplaceable, so doing everything she was doing, like thinking of all the things, filling all the gaps, making yourself irreplaceable, but then making it very clear that you can get it at any point. So maybe advice for her is to like look at some other opportunities and let the department know that she's maybe not gonna stay forever.
Sure. So did everybody hear that? The advice she received was make yourself irreplaceable by picking up all those shifts and doing a lot of different things. I would argue that's very replaceable. That's my I would. Sure. Right. Yes. Yes. I would agree that I would agree that you very much should. It's not a threat, right? This is not a threat. You're a valuable asset to me as a chair. If you're a valuable asset to me as a chair, I treat you like any other valuable asset that matters to me with respect and thinking about resources allocations. I would think very clearly about what it means to be replaceable. I will tell you, and I've got faculty in the room who are my own, everybody is replaceable. I have replaced and been replaced and will continue to do so until I retire. So if you walk away, we still keep going. We still keep going. I don't want you to walk away. Or if you do, I want you to walk away in the right way, like we're going to the cool thing that you're going to do next. But we're all replaceable, and we all will be. And if I can't keep a department ready to replace in an emergency, because terrible things happen, then I'm not doing my job as well as I should. But do think about what is it that is irreplaceable or extremely valuable to the sitting, and as much as I hate to say it on a recorded line, sometimes the shifts aren't the most valuable thing because that is what everyone can do. everyone can do that. What can only you do or only a few of you do? I don't know.
I think once you should know you can.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You should have the knowledge that you're good enough to go get another job.
Yes.
Once you verbalize to your leadership that you are willing to lead, in a way, there's two actions. One, you may get what you want. Or people may, I don't think I'm really committed to it. So, right, so you have to be very, once you actually get that down to your boss, you have to be willing to walk. And that's because you may have stalled your career, depending on how you proceed.
I think there's something in there where you, somebody in some negotiations class somewhere along the line said that that was, the way to do it, but I agree, I think that there is a natural response when, if somebody comes out and overtly says, by the way, I'm looking at these other opportunities, my response is, maybe that's great for you, let me help you with those other opportunities. Because once again, if you really wanna move on to other opportunities, I wanna actually help you do that, because I think that maybe that's really where you're going. And if you're using that as a means to try to stay, I would argue that that's exactly the wrong move at that time.
I'm just add, I think that the department or the organization is more than just one person, And so for me, I think it's important to just recognize that you contribute to that department, but that, just because one person goes doesn't mean that the whole organization crumbles. The other thing is, I think strategically saying no in this case is important, because if you are doing all of those extra shifts, you don't have time for much else, which is kind of said already, but even if you're saying yes to all kinds of opportunities that don't really get you anywhere, you're probably not doing anything very well. So you're not really creating this pattern of expertise, which is super important for promotion, for being known in the field, for really just establishing yourself as an expert in one area.
So one of the things, though, I think that's implied in your question a little bit is adversarial with your chair of, I won't be okay if I don't prove that to you. And I wonder if maybe we could address a little bit of that relationship of, because there's a vulnerability to that, right? I've got to prove to you, you ought to keep hiring me. And maybe that's that negative adversarial relationship is something we should address. So how do you keep people feeling safe that, hey, I'm not looking to fire all of you in that space?
I start a long conversation with people, I've had people come into my office tearful because they feel like they have to leave, tearful because they want to stay but something's not working out. And I try to always say that I took this job primarily because I'm about I'm trying to help people in the group. And if what you feel is best is that you want to leave, then I will help you do that. If what you want to do is to stay, then I will help you do that. And I think that sense of, I value you, I realize that you may be completely pivoting from what your role was and why I hired you, then maybe that's something we can discuss, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna, try to kick you out the door. And I think just being very overt about that is important.
I'm just gonna add on one thing that sort of goes along with this, because I do think at some point in time you have to be a team player. So occasionally picking up the extra shift is important, because your colleagues need to be supported as well. And we all need to be able to get in tag with emergency medicine to make that happen. As a hiring manager though, I want a doer, and I want people who have products that they have. And that can be in a variety of things, but it's incredibly frustrating sometimes when people come and they're like, I want the job, but they haven't actually done anything. And they haven't even done anything, like you try to create these small opportunities that are small at first, but they never step into those roles. And so when they come with the, like, I want to be an assistant dean, I'm like, why? You didn't do these 5 other things. So I think thinking about strategically. And so when your chair or somebody is trying to help you and they're saying, hey, this is a great opportunity, you really need to think of very strategically, is this gonna help me to get to where I want to be? Having an open conversation about that. But sometimes they're trying to create space for you to step into that leadership role. My very first thing that my chair asked me to do was to arrange, and I hate to say this with people I know in the room, pediatric emergency medicine ran rounds. And I was like, oh, why me? And I shook my head and I said yes. And it led to the next opportunity, which where I wanted to be. But like, it wasn't something I really wanted to do, but I asked for something educational to take some leadership in. And sometimes you just have to accept that it's not going to be exactly what you want to be. But then there was evidence that I can do things and accomplish things and get outcomes with them.
And you wanted it for the right reason.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of, it's really difficult in a really transactional world we live in to try to differentiate people wanting a role for the buy down and people wanting a role to make things better. And you hope that there's a combination, and we're all human, right? We all want to make sure we have the time to actually do our job and working less shifts. Sometimes it's really nice. But the trying to understand the motivation, it's a lot different when someone's done some work in that space without the title, because you're like, you've like put the time and you've built your expertise, you know, you're a natural fit, and it just takes some of those like, what's the real motivation behind it, discussion out. Those are tough conversations to have.
I think this is where the, going back to the alignment issue, aligning things you want to do with what the departmental goals are, the institutional goals, because that, in terms of, like you mentioned, making yourself invaluable, things like that, I mean, all of our institutions publish their strategic plans and things like that, so at least have an understanding of what that looks like, and in some ways, how the work we're doing fits into that, and things like that.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Ariane, I'm one of the third-year residents at Metro Freedom, and personally, I'm more junior almost here. I wanted to ask a bit about how you interact with the department chair to be that person who helps advocate to get you to other places, while also being like, I really value potentially staying here, if that, and trying to keep that.
So what does that conversation look like, or actually how does that interaction go? How would you approach your chair?
As a resident, you know, who's looking to potentially want to stay, but also wants to look at other opportunities in terms of faculty positions. Yeah, I try to, and I meet with a lot of the residents as they are getting to the point this year, and I feel like everybody's making decisions very early now, so the conversations have moved earlier and earlier. And I think being honest about, like, I'm not sure, I really want to stay. I've had residents that have sat across from me and said, I really, really want to stay. And I will be very honest and say, I may or may not, I don't know yet, I'm not sure about a position, but either way, I want you to be successful. So getting on the calendar of your chair, if that's not possible, then sometimes there may be a vice chair of education or starting with your PDs to really sort of guide you with that. But I personally love it when people come to me and be like, I want to plan for something that might be next year, because then, once again, now you're in my brain. And now I'm like, oh, there was that role I was thinking I might think about developing, or that person might be leading that nobody else knows about yet, and that she would be great for that. So I think getting in to see and have a conversation is important.
I think bottom line, that is one of the conversations that we actually really, really enjoy.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
somebody will get a question on how can I get to where I want to go, and you know, that's a fun discussion. Much better than 90% of the discussions. You know, so,
We weren't going to talk too much about that.
If you're not going from resident to faculty, that's a good strategy, even if you're like at a crossroads, whether it be professionally or personally and things like that, and you're at least thinking, you know, it's how you do things and how you approach the conversation. I think being open and honest about there's some challenges that's going on, and for better or worse, while I really enjoy the work I'm doing here, I may need to be considering this in the next year or so for such reasons. I think that's a fair conversation to have with your chair.
Yeah, I think being proactive and getting something scheduled early, your chair will meet with you. It just might not be that week, you know? So I mean, getting it scheduled early, they'll take you for coffee or, you know, have time to meet and just talk about your career and your goals. The other thing is that goes the same for other jobs you might be looking for too. People tend to feel a little bit shy about reaching out for coffee or an informational interview or something like that. So whether it's not even your own chair, but a chair somewhere else, or another faculty member, or a CMO, if that's something that you're looking at. People really like meeting and talking about their job and what they like about their job. And I think we just have to change that perception that people don't want to do that, you know? So I think if you can be flexible and proactive, you'll be able to meet with lots of people and really get a sense of what they do, and if that's something that you might want to build a career into.
We have one more case to hit a few other points. I'll move us on just a second. Let's talk about an internal candidate in a vice chair position. Dr. James was well-liked in her role in the emergency department, strong team player, had good peer relationships and clinically excellent, and became the vice chair of operations. When she initially was announced, people were very excited for her, and then things began to shift. She now has a lot more stilted formal interactions with former team members who are now expressing concern not directly to her, but around her. Things coming back to her. She's noticing a lot of tension in that room. And sometimes is even being described as having administrative overreach when someone disagrees with an initiative she had. She is getting complaints to the chair. I think she feels very much committed to the transparency that she had previously, but now she's feeling isolated. And she's had a lot of shift in dynamics and struggling to find guidance. So I would love to hear what you guys think about where she should go, what she needs, and how she should address, we'll start at first, how should she address this isolation that she's feeling in her new leadership role?
I'll start with that. So I think this is really challenging because the more you get promoted, I mean, most of us really start in these very collaborative positions. You're working with people, potentially across departments and doing things. And as you get promoted, there's fewer and fewer people who are like you in some ways. And so, and you can't always have some of those real friend conversations with people who, and I've also had a job where my boss then became sort of, I supervised them, and that was really uncomfortable, and it really changes the dynamics. At least for me, I started in the clerkship director realm, and so many of those people that I started in CDM with are now sort of in dean level positions, and we sort of grew up through SAEM together. And so to me, that has been invaluable. Like, how do you move then outside the institution for your support network? I think has been invaluable to me to think about. It's nice to have an outside perspective on items that are going and that situations that you're trying to navigate. They don't know the players, they're not tied to the culture. They can give you some objective advice as you're trying to navigate those difficulties. And almost everyone in these positions has gone through the same thing in some sort of way. And so having that outside, I think you mentioned to normalize some of that as well, I think is incredibly helpful.
What advice would you give women stepping into a new leadership role to get essentially buy-in from the people that they are leading? And what strategies would you suggest for somebody coming into that role? And does that differ, do you think, from like an internal candidate coming in, already having those relationships, and external, and do those strategies differ? I think it does differ. I mean, I think, if you're internal, you probably have relationships, people, who to reach out to for certain things. And if you're external, it takes a while to start to figure out who's doing what and what people's structures and responsibilities are. Regardless, though, I do think that relationships are very important. And just, I think you said, Linda, meeting with people and getting to know them and what kind of goals they have and how you can get them to be able to, work at the top of their career and see what their aspirations are and things like that. And I think that sometimes when you're coming in as an internal person, I came in as an interim chair for a while, then became chair. You just know people in a different way, and you know who you can ask advice to, and people will be really honest with you. And I think that that's important, to be able to take people's suggestions, criticism, feedback, and figure out how you can, move the department in a way that works for that group that's there and really incorporate your vision into that. So, but it's tricky. I think externally, it takes a while to just get to know people.
Yeah.
So
I've been in fellowship for 3 years now, and I will say I'm still learning people because, especially when it's not just like people within your department, especially if you are trying to collaborate with others outside the department, it's getting to know them. It's them getting to know you and trust your work product. So one thing that I say is, first of all, give yourself some grace on that. Know that this isn't going to be a 6-month process or 3-month process. Like it's going to take some time, and then really utilize
your colleagues that you work with in that similar space, because maybe they already, the internal ones, they already know the people and they can make those introductions for you. And many times it's, half, send us a one email, and if you have, if someone will meet, maybe they have the title that's interest, that kind of aligns with what the work that you're doing. Let's see that work on for you, let's move on to.
Yeah, I do think that being external versus an internal candidate makes a big difference. I think that, as an internal candidate, you build that trust over the years. And so much of what we do, so at least my opinion, is built on that trust. Like, people trust that I'm looking out for a department, that I feel that, we're moving in this direction because it's best for the department. And I get a little bit more grace, I think, because people are like, well, we've known her for a long time, she's never, gone off the rails before, so hopefully this is the right one. But I think that building of trust is important. So when you're coming in as an external, building the relationships before, you're making, you might have to make some big changes, but thinking about how you're working through your change management is going to be important, because so much of it is communication, transparency, trust, communication. So yeah, I think, it's different depending on what you're into.
When you talk about that communication strategy, how did that shift for those of you who were internal when you're now supervising former near peers?
It's funny, I don't feel like strategy changed that much. I don't know. I mean, I think that obviously the things that I could talk about openly and freely with certain people, like things that I would just, maybe things that I had to keep silent about for a while and then communicate was different. But I do think I didn't change sort of as I am as a leader. I don't think I'm that much different. I mean, people that are here can say when I'm not. I don't think I'm that much different than when I was a vice chair for a while. But yeah, I don't know about other people. I don't know if it changed a lot over here.
I don't think that you necessarily change as a person. I think it can be more awkward for you than it is for other people sometimes, because like people progress in their roles all the time. It's a normal aspect, but people that I talk to who have kind of gone through promotion or gotten different positions are like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to act? Or like, I'm supervising this person my age. That definitely happens.
Yeah.
And I think just, making sure, like you said, communication, making sure that you're explaining what you're doing for changes. Doesn't mean to say yes all the time. But just being open and honest about it and just acknowledging that this is now a position, you're moving into that position. I think, I don't know, I think it's okay. I think it is totally, you're able to navigate it. But it's both from your perspective and the other person's perspective. It's just a little bit of a new dynamic, and that's fun. So.
Yes.
How do you, as a chair, if there's somebody comes to you or they want a different role or more responsibility in some way, how do you, but like, you're not quite sure if that's the right place for them? As chairs, how would you have that conversation?
Go back to these, it's projects,
Mhm.
right?
So,
But finding something it's small to bite off, to make sure that they're what they really want,
Mhm.
maybe, to show that they can do it.
Give them
and
skills.
Some experience in the role and in the area that they want.
I like to give a time limit to that. Because I don't think we always know. And I've seen in my role navigating it, I've had people who the first role they picked wasn't the right role. And then we get to that place that's the right role. And so what I do like to tell people is, okay, we try this on. Nothing is permanent, right? None of our roles are permanent. So let's take it on for a period of time, no less than 6 months. By 9 months, we know whether or not we're going to keep going forward with you in that role or whether this isn't the right fit. And then we need to think about where you're going to go next with it. But one of the strategies we haven't really talked about a whole lot yet is when looking at succession planning, delegated authority, and interim roles. I'm a big proponent of interim roles. Whether you actually take that title that goes with the role itself or you take another interim role. Sometimes we can have whole conversations about the curse of the interim and whether you get that permanent or not, but that can be a really great place to try on. And there's a little bit less stress, performance stress, right? We accept that the interim is doing a good thing, stepping into this, should get something out of it. So I think that's one way to try it on, but I love the time limited approach to it of we're going to I'll sit down at 6 months, take it, start there, and then we can give it back if it's really not the right fit, but commit to it long enough till we know for sure, both of us, that it's the right fit for you. This next role's the right fit.
I'm gonna comment on what you just said about the succession piece.
Mhm.
So my first dean, during my first review, was like, so who replaced you if you got hit by a bus? And I was like, and I was like, that is such a rude thing to say. But the more I thought about that, I have also said that to people because,
Mhm.
you know, I think that we don't spend enough time thinking about succession planning. And so for me, what that meant was after I got over the initial shock, I was like, oh, okay, who am I helping build up and how am I purposely mentoring and making sure that, you know, people have opportunities and experiences that if I had to step away for whatever reason, hopefully not a bus, somebody could step into that role and the department would continue. And so for a lot of the strategic leaders in my department, I also ask them a version of that question because then it gets them thinking about who would they mentor to step up into that position should something happen or something happy, like they get promoted, you know? And so my whole department has been really focused on that. So almost everybody has an individual or two who would be able to do that position, and it's a cool opportunity for them. And then as somebody gets promoted, I don't have to panic either, you know, so it's kind of this win-win, because I have more of a seamless transition for these really key roles in my department. And it's a good conversation because then you get to know, you know, to our first case, what people are interested in early on.
Marketing calls it no single point of failure, which is a much nicer way.
Well, and to your point, it's not always the bus that you get hit by. Someone else might get hit by a bus and you have to be called up to another role. So it doesn't always have to be a really horrible thing, but it's a point of vulnerability for it. I think it's also a point of opportunity for the department, because I think many of you who are younger and earlier career than we are, if you don't think you're going to go somewhere at that institution, that's that first reason for you to start looking. If you don't think that's going to happen. And so I think some of what we're doing when we think about giving people that next opportunity is, okay, hopefully everybody has the opportunity to move forward, whether or not they do. Yeah, go ahead.
What is y'all's approach and strategy to building individuals up who want to continue to progress in a career, but recognizing that by doing that, they have to start, you know, doing things, getting involved, and trying to balance that with maintaining their wellness from not doing too much, which is difficult, right? Everything you do, you know, is still work at the end of the day, but how do you counsel them on trying to maintain that while knowing that you're not getting anything, you know, time out of it, so it will help their career?
I think it goes back to just being strategic with your time. I mean, that's the way I'm interpreting the question. Because there's only a limited amount of time in the day, and, you know, we want to factor in all the things that are important to you. I mean, love my work, but family is important. You gotta factor in that time and the things you wanna do that are important. So, what activities, what is going to also allow you to, gain, you know, opportunities for promotion or being seen as we talked about, whether that be involvement in one organization instead of three, or highly engaged in one organization instead of like just like sprinkling over three type of situation.
I mean, I think just to kind of be frank, everyone wants that protected time to do their growth and development, and we just don't have it. Right, we have to, the shifts have to be covered, and every shift that we give somebody is about a 25,000 plus hit on the budget that we have to cover. And so there just isn't enough funds to give people the time that they want to grow. And so there has to be some individual mindfulness on how you're spending it. Because, I mean, I'd love everyone to work 10 shifts. But no one wants to take salary to do that. And there's no way I'm gonna get the money. So, I mean, it's all about some give and take, because everyone wants more time to work less.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest questions I get asked regularly, and it's one of the things, I would love to be able to give all the people, I mean, all the time, but we just, as I said, we just don't have the finances to be able to do it for everyone. And I think, we're all gonna be making decisions. We know that this is a high burnout field, and so we wanna maintain our career and happiness in our career for as long as possible. And there's always gonna be trade-offs in that. And individual trade-offs, departmental trade-offs. And if it was really easy, if you find a solution, you should let me know. You can reach out by email, because it is the hardest thing, and I don't like having to say no to people that I think, I would love in another situation to be able to support in some way, but we have limited resources and we have to allocate them.
And part of it's ask, right? It's a much different ask. We say, hey, look, I really want to do X. Can you support me through a course?
That is true.
That's a huge different ask from a chair than, hey, you know what, I want to do all these things and I don't have time to do all these things in my clinical and maintain my walls. So I think part of it is just strategizing your ask.
And there are gonna be times, like, there are gonna be busier times in your life, or busier years in your life than others, and being okay with that. Maybe now it's not the right time for that, but
Yeah.
maybe next year or the
Yeah.
next 2 years. So that's where that strategic planning comes into play.
That longer range view of this is a career we're talking about, this year might not be the right year. That might,
But
like that.
definitely when I think about new strategies and everything else, wellness is now a core part of everything I think about for the department, for the faculty. It is critically important. It's just how do we get there for everybody is not sometimes straightforward.
I think it's challenging us to have a much more flexible approach because, to Deb's point, we don't want to talk, but we don't want everybody to be taking pay cuts. But for some people, a full FTE isn't 100% the right job all the time, and there is time is your single most valuable asset, and so that kind of flexibility may come into play. But I think it is requiring all of us as chairs, not just the women, to be a lot more flexible and really creative in how we do it. We're coming close to the end. I just want to acknowledge the two women who had to step out are getting awards later on. So if you're able to step into the awards session next, they're getting some cool recognition. So, all right. I thank you very much for the discussion we've had today. Before we close out, are there any last questions, things you'd like to ping us with?